G'day, my friend. Welcome back to Super Freak. Today we're talking about increasing our standards. How do you increase your standards? How do you start living at a new baseline or a new benchmark for any area of life? In the world of coaching that I live in, getting a great result once, to me, is not good enough. Getting a great result sustainably over time is the benchmark, is the standard that we are going for. Why? Because how often do you achieve a great result and then think to yourself, well, it was probably just a fluke, or oh, I've got all these really, really accurate, good reasons and justifications for why I was able to hit it once, but I can't do it again. And I don't see the point in lifting your standards so you can achieve something great once and then the rest of your life kind of sinks back to normal. But that is kind of how it works a lot of the time for us, because we don't realize that great results are actually an effect of your internal standards for yourself. Great example is when someone wins the lottery and you know that 5 years later, typically they are back in the same financial position that they were before they won, which is crazy and outrageous to me. But because we have certain standards around how we feel about money, how comfortable we are with having money, our certain standards for what we do with money when we have it, we end up just repeating those standards whether we have a lot of money or not a lot of money, and we end up in the same result. And I don't want that for you. I want you to understand that you can achieve something wonderful. You can achieve your goals. And if you don't like the word goals, you can achieve your dreams. You can have what you want, and you don't have to just do it once and never have it happen again. So first, let's talk about what the heck even is a standard, because sometimes when I bring this up with clients, they assume that there's one standard. And if they're not meeting it, like if they're not the type of person who buys brand new clothes all the time, then they don't have standards or something like that. There's something going on with people where they have this idea of what the word standard means, like there's a standard. And if you don't meet it, you don't have standards. And that's not true. Everybody has standards, no matter how you live or what you do. And I'll explain what I mean. There are certain benchmarks that you live by. There are certain things that you will accept. That's what a standard is. It's what you accept without even thinking about it. It's your benchmark way of operating. And for some of us, our standards are comparatively high compared to others. And for some of us, our standards are comparatively low or just different to others. So for example, you might be somebody who does not shop at places where you can purchase new clothes. You always buy secondhand clothes. That might not be because you have low standards. That might be because you have a high value in a circular economy. Like that could just be a choice that you've made. It doesn't mean you have low standards. You might be someone who, no matter what it is, you always buy the most expensive thing because, I don't know, you have a belief that it's better if it's more expensive. You might be someone or know somebody who, no matter when the bill is due, it gets paid the moment that it comes in. You might be someone who is always late paying their bills. You might be someone who has never, ever missed a bill payment or a mortgage payment or a rental payment. You might be someone who needs to get a few eviction notices before. Probably not if you're listening to this podcast, but there are some people who will let things slide and slip until they have an absolute last warning, and then they pay the fine or then they pay the bill. There's no such thing as better or worse. It is just about your standard. It's just about what you typically have going on for you. And obviously, sometimes circumstances dictate that we are unable to lift our standards for whatever reason. Totally acknowledge that, totally understand. And I want to talk about being able to gently and slowly or quickly, increase your standards and change your life. There are so many people that I have met over the years who have talked about how they made a lot of money really quickly and then they weren't able to sustain it, or their life completely transformed and changed in a really, really good way, but they really struggled with imposter syndrome or believing that they were worth it once they had it. And all of this is to do with your standards. So let's talk about it. What does it feel like to have a standard? How do you know that you have a standard around something? This is the funny thing. It feels like nothing. It feels like no big deal. It feels normal. So if you're used to being in relationships with idiots, it's going to feel quite normal that the people that you date are idiots. If you are used to being somebody who is completely always treated respectfully in relationships, that's going to feel normal. It's going to feel outrageous to hear a friend talk to you about someone treating them poorly and that they have accepted it in some way. For example, right? If your standard is that you only eat organic food, it's not going to be like, wow, this is how I live my life. It's so fabulous. You're probably going to be like, that's where I shop. No big deal. Don't really even think about it. Unless it's a new standard and you're happy about it and a little bit excited. But I'm really talking about over time. Over time, your standards start to feel really normal. Let's talk about the standard of money. If you're someone who is not used to making very much money, then it's going to become this thing that feels habitual and standard, that there's never enough. And that's going to feel normal all the time. Then when you shift your standards, having a little bit more than enough or having savings might at first feel really uncomfortable, but over time it becomes the new standard. And then you might become someone whose money makes money for them, and then that becomes standard too. But every time we shift our standards, at first it feels a little bit uncomfortable. We have to really think about it. In NLP, there's these layers of learning. At first, you are unconsciously incompetent. Like, the word incompetent doesn't mean you suck. It just means you are unable to do the thing well. So at first, we don't even know that we can't do this thing well. We're not aware of it. Then we become consciously incompetent. Like, I'm aware that I don't know this thing, or I don't have education in this thing, or I'm lacking in this skill, or that I actually am pretty bad at this thing. Then over time, we learn and we practice and we become consciously competent. And so through this podcast, you're going to learn to become consciously competent at recognizing your standards and potentially starting to increase your baseline for your standards. Consciously competent means we can do it, but we have to think about it. And then over time, you become unconsciously competent, which means you don't even have to think about it. You're not aware of it. You don't think about it on a day-to-day basis. It just is. It feels normal. So right now, where you are today in this moment, you already have unconscious competence at the standards that you already have. Now, what's funny about this is that the standards you already have, you might not like them, but you might not even be aware that it's a standard. And that's the same thing as unconscious competence. You're going to become aware today that perhaps the standards that you have, you don't like, or they're standards that are giving you results that you don't actually want. Then you become consciously incompetent, which sounds weird, but really you're just consciously aware that you now have a standard and that you don't like what the standard is. Then you circle back into consciously competent, where you become aware of trying to do it. Oh my gosh, I feel like I'm saying this way too many times while I'm talking to you. But then eventually, again, the standard becomes unconsciously competent, where you don't even have to think about it. It's a new benchmark. It's a new standard. So we're always cycling through these things. And when you learn it for the first time, even if your standard is really good, it's totally unconscious. So what I'm trying to say is we're making the unconscious conscious today. Then you might realize that you don't like what you are doing. Then you'll have to think about changing it, but eventually it will become unconscious again. Whew, that was a mouthful. Take a little break. So we all have standards around everything. It feels like nothing to have a standard. It feels like it's just the way that it is. Whether you win everything you turn your hand at, or you feel like you're an unlucky person and you fall over every time you do things, or you constantly feel like there's not enough money, or you never don't have savings in the bank, you have standards. We all have standards. And what I want you to know is standards are growing and dying all the time. Depending on where you hang out, your relationships, your environments, your communities, where you learn, wherever you're kind of taking in information and hanging out with other humans as well, that can actually start to solidify or influence your standards. I'm sure you've heard. Now, I want to say this first and upfront, because people really take this way too literally. Like, they think if they hang out with someone who's having a negative day, that it's contagious and they're going to catch it. You don't always have to hang out with people who are exactly like you, who believe what you believe, who, that's actually not what I'm saying. But in general, your main relationships in your life, they do influence you. And so if there are people in your life who have certain standards that you don't love, you may need to be really aware that you're also taking in other information so that, it doesn't influence you too much and you can keep that balanced perspective. But when we're in a bit of a house of mirrors, you're in a circumstance or a situation where over time it can really start to erode your standards. And I've seen this with a lot of business owners where through COVID, for example, things really changed. And for a lot of us, our social standards actually changed. For some people, their hygiene standards changed. But like during COVID, when we weren't able to be as social as we normally would, our social standards actually shifted and changed. And for a lot of us, they haven't really gone back. We're probably a little bit less social, a bit less likely to want to leave the house. And because of the way technology has changed during that time, it makes it easier to uphold a new standard where we don't do as much. For some, they went completely the opposite and are now more social and doing more than they ever have because they never want to feel that feeling again. If you're in a relationship and over time, that human being is really, really, really good for you, they will slowly but surely and gently probably increase the standard of what you expect to feel inside of a relationship. But the same thing can work in reverse. During COVID, some businesses, and I'm not just specifically talking about COVID, but it's a good example, some businesses really had to shift their mindset around what was possible and what they could make and how they needed to change their businesses to stay open and things like that. Maybe cash flow was really tight. And when we're in a circumstance where over time consistently the standard had to change, we sometimes need to change our expectations in order to survive. So that is one way that our standards can actually slip. And I'm saying this to you today because what's interesting about that is the way that we let our standards slip feels easier than increasing our standards, but we actually do the same thing to increase them as well. It's really gentle, it's subtle, it's over time, and you can do it both ways. So remember, standards are growing and dying all the time. And over time, they become unconscious depending on how much input and practice you are putting in to increasing your standards or having the standard that you have. Okay, so there's no standard that's better or worse than another standard. But we have them in every area of life. So for example, love, like the way people treat us and the way we allow ourselves to be treated and the way that we treat others is a standard. I'm going to go off on a little caveat here and talk about healthy versus unhealthy relationships. It's got so much to do with standards. It's not always our fault. Here's an interesting example. If you grew up in an environment or a family where there was chaos in your household, or there was addiction, or there was, abuse or something like that, the standard wasn't necessarily healthy, but it can feel good for you and safe because it's what you know. So an unhealthy relationship is something that is not good for you, but feels safe, feels good for you, but is not good for you. That is an unhealthy relationship. And then if you were to shift your standard to going from an unhealthy relationship to a healthy relationship is something that feels good for you and is actually good for you. And in the in-between, when you're shifting that standard and moving from unhealthy to healthy, at first, a healthy relationship can feel unsafe because it's not what you know. It's not your standard. It's not the regular. Does that make sense? So standards are this really interesting game to play whereby we have to be aware that just because something feels familiar and safe doesn't mean it's necessarily good for us. And something that feels unsafe and unfamiliar doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad for us. It could just be the effect of our internal standards that we have placed. Now, I work with people all the time in changing their standards, and I'm thinking about recent conversations that I've had with clients who are completely changing their wealth, profile, their wealth story, their money story in a way that's going to transform their children's lives and generations beyond them. And they've grown up in a very different wealth scenario. People think, well, if I just had more money, it would be so much easier. I'd be happy. I wouldn't have a problem with that. But what they don't realize is if your standard has to change and you're used to, for example, working all the time for money, working really, really, really hard. That's all you've ever known. That's all that's felt safe. That's all that you've ever seen. That's what's been the standard. You move into a different scenario where all of a sudden you have these investments that pay you dividends and you've got wealth growing and coming in and it's never going to change. That can feel really, really, really unsafe. That can feel really uncomfortable. And so we need to do the work to shift our standards to make what is healthy and what's good for us actually feel good as well. So very interesting topic. obviously there's a lot to say. The first thing I want you to be thinking about though is like, what if every single result I was getting, what if who I'm showing up as is actually a standard? It's not me. It's not my soul. It's not, my whole personality. It's just the standard that I have, and that standard has been built off of my experiences. I remember when I was at university, the standard was that I just never got sleep all the time, and I was always working really, really, really hard. And when I finished university, I kind of didn't know what to do with myself and all my spare time. So I just worked a lot. And it was because this standard of like being beaten down and working really, really hard all the time and having all these all-nighters just to keep up with the amount of work that I had was really difficult to kind of let go of. I started creating a lot of chaos and busyness in my life because that's kind of what I knew. It was a really weird experience. When I started my business and I went from doing a job that was 8 a.m. till 6 p.m., some people call that a 9 to 5, but that wasn't the case for me. When I went from that job to starting my business, and not every hour that I worked was an hour that actually brought in money because I'm not working with clients all day, every day, I found myself doing what my mum used to call fart-assing around. She used to say that to us as kids, stop fart-assing around. And I remember feeling really uncomfortable and just making myself busy once again because I was used to being paid by the hour for my job as an interior architect. And when I started my business, I was not being paid by the hour. So again, I created a lot of busyness and I was just doing stuff to look busy to justify my existence and having a business, but I didn't need to do it. But that was my standard. Okay, so I want you to be thinking about like, wow, my results, what are the standards that I have that are placing my results here? Do I like this standard? Does this standard align with my values? Is this who I am? I don't want you to shame yourself with any of this. I don't want you to beat yourself up over any of it, because some of those standards you might go, actually, I don't have to be someone who purchases new clothes all the time. I really love shopping at op shops. It lights me up. It makes me feel really, really good. And I don't want to spend my money on this type of thing like a brand new car. I'd rather spend my money on experiences. Not that you can't have both, but I want you to just be aware that your standard exists and then ask yourself, do I like it? Does this align with my values? Is this what I want? Is this the type of person that I want to be? So here are some places where you can have standards. Love, health. Some of us, for example, would never consider not being a member of a gym or a specific type of gym, or always having a Pilates class to go to, or exercising every single day in a non-negotiable way. And some of us have standards of smoking, or I don't know, not moving our bodies, or not even thinking about moving our bodies. And there's everything in between, of course. Money, there's always standards around money. I love talking about money standards. So it might be that you always pay your bills late, that you always pay your bills on time, that you always have savings, that you always pay yourself first, that you always save first, that you are organized with money, that you never have enough money, that there is always never enough, or always only just enough, or that you are always investing. Okay, time. We have standards around time, always feeling rushed, always feeling like you're late, always being punctual, for example. Standards around time is how much time you give yourself to do things, how much time you allow yourself to rest. Some people have really, really, really low standards comparatively. There's no such thing as a general standard. There's like guidelines, but there's no general standard that we were born with. And some have a higher standard. It just is what it is. Okay. So let's say you wanted to change your standards around money. Okay. First of all, you'd have to work out what your standard is. And I've used this example already, but for some folks, just making enough money is the standard. Like at the moment, they're not kind of making enough money. And so the first shift in standard might be actually making enough money to cover all the bills, or making more than enough so that you can have a little bit of savings. Or no matter how much money you make, you always spend it. Also starting to save just a little bit. Then the next standard would be having a little bit more than enough. So stockpiling a little bit of money, saving a little bit of money, not spending every single dollar or more than what you actually earn or make with debt and with credit. Then the next standard would be having that money that you have saved make money in and of itself, such as investing and things like that. But expecting yourself to go from someone who lives well beyond their means and is constantly in debt and never has enough money, to being someone who invests regularly, always has a cushion, and is someone who doesn't actually need to work because their dividends and their investment returns cover off their expenses more than they need, then it's actually a journey to go from one end of that spectrum to another. But it's a journey that requires just the same type of steps. Going from a negative net wealth number to a positive net wealth number, and then multiplying that net wealth number is just a case of gently and slowly increasing your standards, which is pretty cool. One of my clients, she recently bought a house, her very first house. And she said to me, my gosh, this was like on my vision board, that I had a house that kind of looked like this that I've wanted since I was a little girl. And I plan on growing old here. And I said to her, isn't that cool? It's the beginning of your property portfolio. And she just looked at me and was like, you just blew my mind, because she never thought about that this could be the first of many. And our standards will affect how we even think about what we're doing and whether we think beyond it too. So it's not difficult to start shifting, but we just have to be aware of we have to make the unconscious conscious by taking in information that challenges our thinking. And that's why something feeling unfamiliar or unsafe doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad for us. It's just challenging to the standard. Okay, so I have a few ways and they're pretty simple, to help you increase your standards or shift your standards if you want to shift them up or shift them down. I'm going to go through them now. The first one is systems. Okay, we got systems, strategies, automations, gently, and repetition. Pretty simple. The first one is systems. So think about this. Instead of having to think about consistently what you are doing, like let's say you want to go from someone who has zero savings to starting to save regularly, rather than having to become the type of person who has to remember periodically, every time money comes in or you get paid, to actually physically, tangibly take some of that money and put it into a savings account, which is going to require willpower. It's going to require discipline. It's going to require remembering. What if you just automated it? Like you had a system where periodically, every week you sit down, and if you can't automate it, you automatically take a percentage. And of course, there's still going to be discipline in that, but it's not going to be ad hoc. Wherever you can automate it, you might automate it. You might want to have the standard of having a clean house, for example. These are funny examples, but I think they paint the picture. If you're someone who typically does not have a consistently clean house and it frustrates you, you might set up a system or a routine or a ritual where every night before you go to bed, you clean the kitchen and you do the dishes, or you do the washing on a certain day. You have a system, set it up. Let's say you have habits that support you in showing up and making sales in your business on a regular basis. So rather than hoping that sales come in, and when they do come in, I know what some people do is they avoid answering the question, they avoid talking about the invoice, they avoid asking for money, or they avoid talking about whatever they're selling in their business or their work, or they avoid asking their boss for a raise. Instead of that, having a system for regularly jumping in and doing the work that needs to be done for sales. That can also be having a system where someone else does it for you. It could be keeping your finances organized, having a system where every week you sit down and you just do the stuff that organizes your finances, so tax time is not stressful. That's an example of a system. So rather than relying on pure remembering, pure discipline, and pure willpower, you are still going to have to use those things in order to get the systems going. But once they're going, they become regular. The next one is strategies. So a strategy is a series, just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a series of habits or actions or thought processes that solve problems, that are tactical. I don't know if you can hear the kookaburras outside. Maybe. They sound really cool. A series of habits or actions or thought processes that solve problems, that are tactical to get you one place to the next, and that are designed to get the result that you want. So a lot of our results currently and the standards that we have are actually due to unconscious repeated strategies that happen. Like there's a strategy underneath absolutely everything that you do, and the strategy creates the standard because the result becomes the standard. So you have a strategy for staying broke. You have a strategy for being happy. You have a strategy for always having money in the bank. You have a strategy for not being in feast and famine in your business, or constantly being in feast and famine in your business. And that strategy is not necessarily always about just what you do, but it can be about how you're thinking about things, and your thoughts affecting your feelings, those feelings affecting your decisions, those decisions affecting your results, the actions, and the actions affecting your results, for example. So think about your strategies. So a strategy might be, let's say you wanted to consistently be someone who is not in feast and famine in their business, constantly has sustainable ongoing income and sustainable ongoing clients. So your strategy is probably not going to be around push, 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 and then when you have clients, relax and not do any marketing. Or sell, 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 or oversell something and have people purchase something on sale that they're going to use forever and then they don't buy anything in the following months. Your strategy for having consistent, sustainable income might be making sure that there are options for people to pay you in a recurring way. It might be to have options where you are always marketing and you're not just not marketing your business when you don't think you need clients. So there's no like on and off switch. So the strategy is going to make a big difference to the standard. If you have a standard of being in love, being in a happy, healthy, sustainable relationship, the standard might be that when there are problems, you go to therapy. It might be that the standard is you actually communicate about the things that frustrate you or that hurt you. If you have a standard for the opposite, it's going to be probably that you don't communicate or whatever. So your strategies are going to impact the standard over time, and those strategies eventually become habits. Those strategies become unconscious, and this is how we end up having standards where we just think this is the outcome, this is just my life, this is who I am. It's not the case whatsoever. There's always stuff underneath it. So in order to keep the strategy going, you would need a system to kind of uphold it. Maybe a check-in system, maybe a consistent ritual or habit where you get cleaned up and you get organized, or you say what's on your mind or whatever it might be. Okay, the third one is automation. And we've already mentioned like automating your savings and your money. But what I mean is automating how you spend your time and knowing that eventually your strategies do become automatic. So automating the strategies, automating the systems, automating wherever you can so that you don't have to actually think about the standard. And just know, like I said, your strategies do eventually become automatic. Eventually, you don't have to think about the fact that after dinner, you get up and you clean up. Eventually, you don't have to think about that when you feel uncomfortable, you just communicate what's going on. Eventually, you don't have to think about that every Friday you sit down for Financial Friday and you have, a meeting with yourself and you organize your finances, for example. The next one is gently, gently. This is about not pushing super hard or trying to push really hard to become the end step in this process. Just gently allow yourself to go beyond what you normally do and help your nervous system acclimatize. Now, when I was a university student, I did not save any money unless I needed to go on a trip or wanted to go on a trip like traveling. But unless I had a reason to save, I just didn't. I spent every dollar that I had. And I remember learning to save, like transferring $1 or maybe it was $10 or something into a like savings account. And it was really, really, really uncomfortable to know that I had money there that I could spend that I was choosing not to spend. It just like my whole strategy, I had this identity around saving being so boring, like it just sucks, And so if I started saving all of my money straight away, I would never have kept that up because it felt too uncomfortable, too unfamiliar, too unsafe, too far away from what my standard was. So when I say gently, gently, I'm not saying that you can't just like burn a bridge and completely set a new standard, especially if you have a significant emotional event that makes you go, never again, because that's how sometimes people do actually shift their standards. But you have to be very gentle with yourself beyond that to make sure that your nervous system can still acclimatize and it does become normal. I'll give you an example. I remember when in my business, I was never someone who kind of showed up and taught workshops or put myself on any form of like stage or anything like that because I didn't want people to think I was just telling everyone what to do all the time. And obviously sometimes that's the case, but it just felt really uncomfortable taking up space and taking up any kind of like authority or whatever. I don't know. Anyway, I remember after the first time I ever taught an online workshop and it was live, my body was like buzzing. I was so uncomfortable and I loved it. I had so much fun, but yeah, I was really buzzing afterwards. I could tell I was like kind of high on adrenaline and like nerves and whatever else. And so I had to go and like sort of ground myself, like go outside. I think maybe I took a bath. I don't know, but I did some stuff to like just bring my nervous system kind of back down. And gently is about making sure that you become the person over time and make it sustainable. So I'm about to say, like, the next step is how you actually do that. But what I want you to know is doing it once does not equal new standard necessarily. But even after you do it once, if your body is feeling really weird about it or unsafe, like for example, you save $10 and it feels like, oh my gosh, it's so weird, then you don't kind of save it and go, shut up, body, like it's fine. You do something really, really nice to kind of nurture yourself and nurture your nervous system. You can put your hand on your heart and be like, oh, that's really, really healthy. It's safe. Like I feel really good doing that. It's okay. And it's not always going to be something as simple as that. It might be, well done, you taught your first workshop. I'm going to buy myself some flowers, or I'm going to go outside and lay on the grass and just kind of chill and breathe for a second, or take a bath, or I don't know, celebrate somehow. You can actually set a new standard and then teach your nervous system that it is safe, gently. Celebrating new milestones is a really great way to do it. Self-care is also a really great way to do it, but also just acknowledging that you did it and then not touching it and then doing something else to distract you from the fact that you've just done that thing so you don't undo it is also really good as well. But the whole time, like grounding yourself into like, see, I'm still safe. It's all good. So if you're the type of person who never communicates with their partner because you feel so uncomfortable being vulnerable, then the first time you do it, you're probably going to feel a little bit wired. You're going to feel like you maybe have a vulnerability hangover. And that would be a time when you might pick a fight or just feel really, really weird. But what you might want to do is acknowledge that you have a vulnerability hangover and do something really kind to yourself to bring your nervous system back down. A vulnerability hangover it's not a bad thing. It just means it's unfamiliar. I hope this is making sense. So be really gentle with yourself when you expand your standards. If you are doing sales for the very first time, you're probably going to feel uncomfortable stepping in and asking for money or asking for someone to pay you. And it might not always go the way that you want to go, but gently be really, really nice to yourself. Okay, so gently. And the final thing is repetition. Do it 100 times. Don't do it once and then say to yourself, it didn't work. I'm not doing it. This sucks. It's not my thing. I'm just not made for this. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. No. Do it 100 times. And in fact, my friend, listen, do not judge how it is going. Do not even make an assessment or even think about how you think it might be going until you've done it 100 times at least. Because by the time you've done it 100 times, that's when it starts becoming a standard. That's when it starts being less adrenaline-y. I don't think that's a word. You know, you're fueled by adrenaline, you're fueled by fumes, you're fueled by excitement or whatever. And you're actually grounded into the process. That's when you can assess if it's working or not. Because for the first little while, of course, 100 is not like ironically, a standard. It's not a standard. It's a metaphor. Do it as many times as possible until it starts to feel normal. I remember, I used to be only a shower singer, and I do love to sing, but doing it in front of other people, nothing ever came out of my mouth. It was really weird. And I remember even, doing little Christmas performances where we would force our family to listen to us sing a song or whatever at Christmas Eve, me and my cousins. But I remember as an adult, my brother's a really great musician, and he invited me to come and sing with him at this pub. It was late at night. It was only going to be drunk people there listening to us. Not a big deal. But I was terrified. I couldn't actually stand up at the same time as singing because my knees were so wobbly. My hands were white knuckling the stool underneath me. I needed to do a shot of, I don't know, my friend got me something really strong to try and relax me. I didn't need to do that, but you know what I mean. I was so incredibly nervous. It was really hard for me to even get the voice to come out of my mouth. But over time, practicing doing that, it just made it easier and easier and easier to not be focused on the same things. Over time, you actually can take in more information. You can take in the audience. You can focus on like other things besides how nervous that you feel. And I know this happens for a lot of people with public speaking. The idea of stepping in front of other people and actually having something to say is so incredibly nerve-wracking. They fear it more than they fear death itself. And yet over time, you develop a certain comfortability with talking to a lot of people, with not worrying so much about what everyone thinks of you or that you're going to be judged. You develop a certain comfortability with even people not liking what you have to say and what you pay attention to versus what you choose not to pay attention to. You develop a comfortability with feedback, even if that feedback is negative, because over time, it doesn't feel like you are doing public speaking to all these people. It just feels like you're having a conversation with a group that is one kind of unified, being or something. I don't know if that's what it's like for everyone, but I know that performers over time, they just develop their resilience and their ability to show up in front of a lot of people. And it's because they've done it so many times that they can start doing more complex and complicated things because they're not thinking about the strategy to just get on stage in the first place initially. So everything is a standard, my friend. Every single thing is a standard. And I hope I'm giving you good examples, enough that you can see okay, I can actually shift my standards here. If you want to set the standard, you need to start. And then you need to nurture yourself. And then you need to find systems that actually automate it and strategies that make sure you're going to get the result. And then you need to do it 100 times. 100 times, okay? If we don't ever shift our systems, if we don't ever bring this, standard, not systems. If we don't ever bring that standard to light as what is my standard? Is my standard that I'm hiding on social media? If you want to be using social media, is my standard that I don't communicate in important conversations or relationships? Is my standard that I wait to be picked as opposed to putting myself out there? Is my standard that I always pay everyone else first and I don't look after myself? Whatever your standard is, become aware of it and then ask, what do I want instead? What strategies can I use to get myself there? What is a strategy that will get me there? How can I automate and create systems to apply that strategy? How can I repeat this 100 times until I get the result? How can I be super gentle with myself along the way? Now, I want to talk to you about a kind of a funny, I like to give you examples, but I want you to think about this. Sometimes in certain situations, we actually have to lower our standards in order to be happy. I'm not advocating for this. I'm just naming that it's a thing. So in extreme circumstances, I'm talking about really extreme circumstances where you're stuck, where you are sick, where you are in a situation that is just a really challenging, crappy season of life, and there's so much that is outside of your control. Sometimes trying to increase your standards will actually cause a lot of pain because there's things that are outside of your control that you can't do something about. So the standards that I want you to be thinking about shifting are always ones that you have control over in this moment, okay? But I'm thinking about, when I had chronic fatigue. When I had chronic fatigue, yes, it was a standard. It became standard that I had no energy. And I wanted to shift that standard. But there was this very real reality that I had a certain amount of energy that I could use through the day. And then it would just plop away. It was gone. I couldn't argue with that reality. And I wanted to extremely change it. But that desire for an extreme change made me really unhappy, really sad, really uncomfortable because I couldn't change it overnight. So the gently technique, the gently methodology was around excuse me, that's my phone. I'm going to turn it on silent. Was around gently just increasing my capacity to, instead of try to change my situation, it was actually to start by just being where I was. Okay. So sometimes your standard is, my standard is I'm unhappy with where I am, but I feel like I can't do anything about it because I'm out of control. And what you can do is just gently become more comfortable with where you are. Gently, gently become accepting of what is happening and where you are. And that can be the most liberating beginning of a change to your standards. So what happened for me was, instead of fighting where I was, which was actually keeping me sick, I didn't realize, gently, gently was about accepting how much energy I had through the day and trying to make the most of that without being sad about what I couldn't do, but focusing on what I could. And that was a really nice little standard change. So there's always availability to move, but I'm also thinking of, you might be sick right now or going through something really challenging. And there are some things that you have control over, but there are some things that you really can't. If you want to change the standard in a big way, you have to start by changing the standard where you can control it and in a way that you can control. And that might mean lowering your expectations of yourself for a little while, taking the pressure off and finding where you can find, happiness or contentment or something within your current situation, okay? Because think about this too. We can lower our standards intentionally, and that can create a lot of freedom, and that can actually increase. I'm going to give you another example, right? So sometimes I work with clients who want to, in the Fierce Salon, for example, they're making coin, they're doing really well in whatever they're doing. They want to go from good to great. But what we realize when we look under the hood is, in order for them to scale and to go to the next level that they want to go to, like $1 million from, say, $200,000 a year, in order to do that, they actually have to change the way that they are operating, because they're operating at full tilt and there's no room to actually move. There's no room for them to make more with the current level of effort that they are exerting. There's no room for scaling. There's no room for anything. So lowering the standard, because the standard might be I work hard and I get what I want. Lowering the standard or shifting the standard or taking a little couple of steps backwards can mean you get back on a path, and that path can lead to so much more in the future. That's what I'm talking about. Sometimes you can't shift and you feel stuck because you're at the end of the road that you're on. You actually need to lower your standards or change things, and that can open up a lot more freedom later. But just remember too, over time, we can lower our standards, we can lower our expectations of ourselves. That can give us a little bit of peace, a little bit of reprieve, a little bit of freedom, a little bit of being able to survive a certain situation. But then it's really important to go, okay, I've lowered the standard. I don't want this to become a forever standard. Now I need to look for where I can improve again, where I'm free to move again. So let's say you've been in a scenario where you've had challenges in business and you've had to lower your standards or change things or, make adjustments, or you've gone through something in your life that's required you to make some big changes. It's really easy to lower your standards, take the pressure off, whatever you need to do. But what can also happen is you forget that you were able to once do something magnificent, or that you were able to once feel happiness, or that you were able to once feel really, really good or really abundant, or whatever it might be. It's really important to remember that your standards are growing and dying. You're able to shift them at any time. So if you are in a situation where you've had to actually change or lower your standards for a little bit of time, I just want you to know as well, that's not you. Your standards are not you. They are the things that you have come to accept as normal, whether intentionally or unintentionally. So you can use these strategies to actually improve them again, if that's what you want to do. And I want to remind you what they are before we close up. Number one, systems, right? So automating things, making routines and rituals, putting things into place that are step by step, that you just do or get done constantly, not even necessarily by you. The next one is strategies, making sure you have A, B, C, D to get you the result that you actually want, instead of the strategies that get you the result that you don't want. And remember, you can systemize your strategies. The third is automations, automating anything wherever possible, right down to your time and how frequently you do this. The next one is gently, gently. Don't push really hard. Just normalize it within your nervous system. And finally, repetition. Do it 100 times. And then it will start to feel more normal, more automatic within yourself, more unconsciously competent. Okay, so Just think about it. A standard is not a once-off achievement. It's something that you sink into. It's something that you would never go below. It's something that is habitually unconscious. And you can shift them. They're growing and dying all the time. You can transform them and change them. I want you to think about what standards you have that you like, what standards you have that you want to change. And if you want to, you can reach out and tell me what they are. I would love so much to hear that from you. And that is all for today, my friends. I hope you've enjoyed this episode on shifting and increasing your standards. I really hope my little caveat on dealing with situations that are challenging and still understanding that you have a sense of control or a sense of power in your standards is helpful. And I want you to know that if shifting your standards, especially around your business, is something that you're interested in, inside of my masterminds, I have so many systems and strategies and tools and support for people to be able to do this on repeat, sustainably, and automatically. Whether you are someone who is working towards your first 5 to 10K months consistently and sustainably, or you're someone who is already doing quite well and you want to go from good to great, you want to scale, please reach out and I would be delighted to support you through this yourself as well. Regardless, I hope you have a beautiful day. Remember, everything you want is so much closer than you think. So stay curious, stay open, and I will see you soon. Ciao for now.